Cyberpunk 2077 multiplayer or online. This is a topic which has been discussed since the game came out and even prior to Cyberpunk 2077 coming out. There were a lot of discussions if prior to release if Cyberpunk is going to have those things, and then of course developers said that no, this is going to be a single player game overall, and then after the game came out people started speculating what is happening with this. Now initially I was avoiding to talk about this subject because honestly we are way too early to talk about anything when it comes to Cyberpunk Online or any form of multiplayer, because right now they're pretty much working on the first expansion, DLCs and updates for the game. I doubt they will be implementing any form of multiplayer or any form of online into this game for at least 2 years, but because people have been asking me heavily to talk about this subject, I just want to get it out of the way and tell you my opinion, what I think about this and what do we know about this so far. And first off, if anyone tells you that they know that Cyberpunk Online or multiplayer is coming, or they know what is it going to be, they're lying to you, because first off, when it comes to the multiplayer part in Cyberpunk, there has been some how would I say, news which happened like long time ago where people actually saw like some multiplayer tests in the files of Cyberpunk 2077. Now keep in mind, all of that is inconclusive and all of that data is still not out yet completely, so of course, if that was the case, it does seem that CDPR has been playing around with some form of multiplayer in Cyberpunk 2077, but it doesn't mean that it has been done in any way where it's actually going to be a playable version of that game. Now, obviously, CDPR and Adam Kaczynski, the CEO of CDPR, has been openly saying that they want to implement multiplayer into Cyberpunk, and they want to implement multiplayer even into The Witcher, which I understand why is it happening. I'm going to explain why is that happening later on. But when it comes to Cyberpunk 2077, prior to the release, CDPR hired Gabe Amentangelo. Now he is a person who has been working in BioWare and EA when it came to Star Wars multiplayer, and he was actually working on his own multiplayer game, which sadly failed due to, I believe, there were problems with money in the project and then publishers and everything else, but Gabe Amentangelo was always working somewhat in this online multiplayer space. And when obviously he was hired to be a creative director at CD Projekt Red, especially for that multiplayer part, then you had wild speculation started going on. Now after the release, he was actually promoted to a game director within CDPR. And because he does have experience in the multiplayer online field, this could mean potentially, but I say potentially because obviously a lot of what I'm saying is pure speculation, he might be working on something. Now, also keep one thing in mind. I'm sure that also the plans of CDPR towards Cyberpunk Multiplayer and Cyberpunk Online changed after the release of the game, because we obviously saw a lot of issues and everything which was happening with the game itself, and there was no way you're going to focus on multiplayer part then. Now on the other side, what sort of a multiplayer is it going to be, because people are heavily speculating on that. Well, first of all, initially we had some rumors that it's going to be basically like a lobby system where you go with your friends or randoms, whatever, and do certain missions. Now that was some of the first rumors based on the leaks that people were saying. Now on the other hand, people were saying, what about full open world, like multiplayer, like for example GTA Online? Now I'm not an expert when it comes to online games or when it comes to developing in any way, shape or form. I'm just wondering if Cyberpunk 2077 would be able to withstand that. Overall, the amount of player doing that amount of damage throughout the city. I'm just wondering how the code and the game would hold out in that sense. But when it comes to other things, multiplayer modes, as people have been speculating, like you're just going to go and do missions and that's going to be like a repeatable thing where you just do this over and over to basically gain more level and gain more abilities, which in my opinion, that would be okay, but incredibly lazy, and I honestly wouldn't like a multiplayer game where it's basically just going through the same level over and over again, because the basis of Cyberpunk is Cyberpunk 2020. The basis of Cyberpunk is the tabletop RPG, therefore implementing some forms of a tabletop RPG in terms of actually role-playing and having role-playing servers, not to the fullest extent, but utilizing that RPG perspective of the game would definitely be a plus in my book, rather than just having a lobby system where you go and do missions over and over again, because ultimately that's just another online shooter kind of a game without giving you an ability to interact with other people or other players in the open world environment. And people also have been asking, like, what is the possibility of this happening? Well, honestly, the possibility of this happening is quite high, because if we look at other multiplayer games CDPR has been releasing and testing and working around, we obviously have The Witcher Slayer and Gwent. Now, one of the biggest things in a multiplayer environment are microtransactions, because microtransactions are going to generate enough revenue even after the game comes out, and even after the initial sales stop actually happening with the game, you're still gonna be making money through those microtransactions. That's basically how EA and everyone else handles their business, including Rockstar themselves. So when you have microtransactions in a multiplayer game, in a multiplayer environment, that's going to guarantee you're getting enough revenue later on. But there is a huge but here. The problem is that multiplayer segment is incredibly risky to do, because people will not withstand bad multiplayer games, especially today where you have so many multiplayer games. You can just choose which one you want to do, and this craze of companies doing just online games has been out for years now, where basically every single company out there wants to go in. Now, if the multiplayer game is a success, that's great, you're generating huge amounts of money, but that's a huge risk, because only a minority of multiplayer games are actually a financial success from like the business standpoint. You might turn equal, you might do this, but only a handful of games will actually generate you enough amount of money, which is going to later on be like, oh yeah, we actually made it and we can just continue to pump updates into that game for it to work. And that's something that CDPR needs to think about. If they're very serious with multiplayer or online, especially now where their PR is all over the place, they have to be incredibly careful, because if that multiplayer or online fails, that's going to be a big hit for the company, because ultimately then all of your plans that you had for the future kind of failed. So honestly, I am for Cyberpunk and Witcher multiplayer, but only if that's something actually worth playing, because if that's something is going to be just another thing which people are just gonna play for a day or two and basically leave, then no one is going to gain anything from that, and rather just continue doing single player stuff and just avoid multiplayer like at all. Because obviously I wouldn't like to see CDPR end up in a situation where they have a multiplayer game out there and it basically fails or it sucks. There could be a huge possibility for that happening. But again, you know, you can make a lot of money from microtransactions. So far, CDPR has been implementing MTX in their online games, and so far as people have been saying, you know, it's not pay to win, at least when it comes to Gwent. I asked people play Gwent for a long time and they said like, no, you can get all of those cards for free if you want, but if you of course want to pay for those decks, you can pay money for it. So there is a possibility there. Again, we shall see how is it going to be done in that environment, but trust me, everyone is aiming for this online multiplayer part. It's just what every company now wants to do, because once you have an online game which is successful, making content and updating that content is way easier than starting a new project which is going to be either a new IP or a sequel to that IP. It's just how companies work today. So that's my opinion about multiplayer. Hopefully it's good, hopefully it utilizes the RPG segment of the game for as much as it can, because ultimately Cyberpunk is not Call of Duty and Cyberpunk is not Battlefield, so I wish it takes more of that, because, you know, role-playing scene going from GTA to everything else to Arma is vibrant, and I'm sure it would be really good here. Again, I'm not saying about those heavy RP scenarios, I'm just saying utilizing RPG, at least when it comes to classes, or at least when it comes to different builds people would be able to make. But so far this is just a speculation, and don't think about this multiplayer for a very long time until everything else has been sorted out in their company. So hopefully this clears out everything, and this is basically what I'm going to talk about when it comes to multiplayer, unless we have some concrete info to go about. But until that happens, there is really no point in talking about this, because I'm just gonna end up saying the same thing which I said in this video. So hopefully you enjoyed this, hopefully you liked the video. If you did, smash that like and subscribe button for more. Also check us out on Twitter and Discord, and don't forget to also tell me down below, what do you think about this? Do you like the idea? Do you dislike the idea? Do you maybe want to, you know, for them never to do this any form of multiplayer or online, just tell me down below. And of course, huge thanks to my current Patreon supporters. This is LKM signing out, stay classy everyone, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.